Dirty and bloody, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Renato recognized the cards. It was Lapino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, we see this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. The Sky Ripper, the transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Bernardo had already let that armature slip away to save Lapino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that. The core of the Sky Ripper? Lapino's excited. That's an actual thing that we could just go and get. You've been busy. He sure had. Renato told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. Renato grinned. He had a very good feeling about this. It's beautiful here, thought Renato. He was thrilled to be back with his old war buddy. He'd missed the mad rabbit, but something was not quite right. Who needed bridges anyway? This is why heroes are called dashing. Renato thought. See? Dashing? Get it? There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. Once, Renato had been to a dungeon where all the chests were locked. It was awful. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones. No help from it. I'm getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lupino was right. Maybe he should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. It was tempting to just stand on the device and let it do all the killing for him. But that would be sporting, would it? Or fun. As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it. Tell you what, said Lupino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost. The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lupino got the core and then broke it, or lost it, or worse? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Trust me, Renato, you won't regret this. I'll treat the core like it was my own baby daughter. As the Farfarer dived towards the Nexus, Lupino was jumping up and down with excitement. Stop rabbiting around, Renato said. Lupino just stared at him. The moment the ship landed, Lupino leapt off the ship. As Lupino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lupino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs, and he'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore. He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lupino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in the sector. Right? It was good to practice your moves, thought Renato. Keeps you limber. Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway. Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lupino. Of course he had to let Lupino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? If I craft it's going to be really short. Renato took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. One message caught his attention. A high priority order has been given by the Emperor himself to locate something called the Iblis Stone. It was somewhere on a desert island. Bernardo had a bad feeling about this. Iblis was the name of one of the lost gods. If the Emperor was diverting ravens to search for it, maybe he should try to find it first. Then the far-speaker toad chortled a new message. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lapino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lapino again? And now the Empire had the core. Bernardo hailed the rebel base to warn them. But their far-speaker didn't croak back. Was the base under attack too? Lapino would have to wait. The core would have to wait. Bernardo had a very bad feeling that something was going terribly wrong at the rebel base. Its location was secret, but secrets can be discovered. There were Imperials everywhere in the ruins, and dead civilians. The Ravens were killing everything in sight. Bernardo was relieved to see no rebels among the dead. Maybe the secret base was still secret, but there were huge burn marks on buildings. What monstrous weapon was the Empire using here? The core had great power. Had they harnessed it somehow, even though they didn't have the armature? He was more and more extraordinary. This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. Smell charred flesh and hear screams. The ruins were on fire, but the Ravens had rigged up the core as some kind of burning ray. They wouldn't need to know the secret location. They were burning everything. It was killing them too. Their black feathers littered the path. He would have to take the core from them. It was the last thing he wanted to do. Bet you never saw that coming. A lever? That was new. Most people still use doorknobs. Wallabies, he thought. Why did it have to be wallabies? As the last raven fell, Renato felt worse than he ever had. The core was killing him, again. The council members cautiously came out into the smoke. "You saved us," croaked the speaker. They would put the weaponized core deep in a cavern, she promised, where its poison could harm no one. They would heal him if they could, she said. No, he's a weapon now. We need one. I'll lead the charge. "It will kill you," croaked the speaker. "I guess it already has," Renato said. She bobbed her head gravely. "When all this is over," she said, "we'll name our new capital city for you." He flew towards the Imperial fleet, a myriad ships in disciplined formation, waiting for the signal to destroy the rebellion forever. Behind him, the rebels were charging. If he failed, they would die. And so the final battle began. Everything hurt. It was unpleasant to fight this way. With each blow he struck with his sword, he felt weaker. Yet each time the core fired, it got brighter. As if the heat from the burning ravens and buildings only fed its hunger. He wondered where Lapino was. Wasn't he supposed to be in the battle? No. He'd been captured, hadn't he? Oh, Renato's mind was smoky now, like the burning fleet. He hoped this wouldn't take long. Haven't you always wanted to do that? When Renato went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous. These were really nice chests. He should take one home, he thought. Can't we just agree to disagree? Said Renato. No? Major Lando Nardo. If they were going to name a capital city after him, well, he just wished he had a better name. Where was Lupino? He missed Lupino's bitter outbursts. Or did he? Lupino had gotten him into this mess, hadn't he? The core was a wonderful weapon. It swept fire across the fleet. Ravens exploded in its gaze, and with every heartbeat it grew brighter. He would die. But he would die every inch a hero. Spectacularly, changing history like the legendary heroes of lore. Or was it yore? He couldn't remember anymore. Newly remembered knowledge. He needed to focus. This is quite the view, he thought. Reynardo fell to his knees. The Emperor's bodyguards were lined up before his ship. Fierce ravens, all. And Zenobia. She was conjuring. He could not take another step. All he could do was fire the core. The ravens, Zenobia, the ship, all burst into flames, disintegrated, and blew away. So they had one, after all. The core grew brighter. He shielded his eyes, but he could still see it through his sleeves and through the flesh of his arm. And then he felt heat, as the fire grew to consume both fleets. And then he felt nothing. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he just died. Instead, he was on the Farfarer, sailing away from Ubar. And it was still burning. He'd fled burning Ubar years ago, hadn't he? And now he was back there. Had all those years fighting the Empire been nothing but a vision into the future? A useful vision if it was true. He'd learned something. The core was powerful, but dangerous if used improperly. He'd made bad choices. But now, when the real battle came, he wouldn't make those choices. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The book's pages began to flip backwards, towards the beginning. And he realized that his adventure was just beginning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Reynardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned... As he set foot on the island, Reynardo could not help but feel a tinge of guilt. He'd left Lapino behind. He hoped the Mad Rabbit had somehow escaped the ravens. He hoped they hadn't eaten him. If they had, he hoped they hadn't eaten him alive. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Bernardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? The eyes have had it. Open, says me. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the lost gods, thousands and thousands had died. But Bernardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Well, he'd always wanted to do that. Just have a dash, thought Bernardo. Those sheaves were really very well made, weren't they?
Like having a pet. Well, like having a goblin for a pet.
There had to be a way to use the Sky Ripper without causing a catastrophe. Why? Maybe it's always dangerous, he imagines Zenobia saying. Always the voice of reason, that one. Well, there had to be a way to use the Sky Ripper, because not being able to use it was boring. So there. See? That wasn't so hard. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu school. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. But it would be great to see her. Even if they faced off across sword points, as they'd done so many times at school. The world was a less interesting place without her. Sharp? Check. Pointy? Check. Flexible? Check. What else do you need in a sword?
See? With enough leverage, you could go anywhere.
Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfu school was closed now, but he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek. How soft.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
Shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father.
What are you doing?
Asked Zenobia. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He asked her. She shook her head. He told her. His Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. What kind of proof could you possibly have? She said as they landed on the Nexus. Your father ritually sacrificed a village, and he left witnesses? The scientists resurrected one. Well, it's not really alive, but it can talk. A true witness. She frowned. The dead can't lie. Well, I bet they could. They just don't have any reason to. She nodded grimly. You go on ahead. I don't want the Ravens to see me. Once you try it, you're hooked. Smashing things was fun. She caught up with him. Don't you think I'd know if my father wanted to invoke the lost gods? Would he tell you? No. Would you help him? No. I'd burn his books. Why do you adopt a stray cat? You don't ask a thing like that. No, not when there's no good answer, she said, her whiskers twitching. There was a cat in this one, and something useful. The Emperor had learned enough secrets from Renato to crush the rebellion. It would be a fair trade if the scientists could convince Zenobia to change sides. A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that. Some people are just liable to explode if you upset them. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The ravens had burned the reanimated witness to cinders. Renato was stunned. There goes my proof. These were scientists, not rebels, Zenobia said, upset. Why would he do this? I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him. Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first. But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Why was he going to meet up with her? Wasn't it more important to rescue the Rebel Council from the almost certain Imperial attack? Why was he in this war anyway? Was it really to fight the good fight, or did he just want to see her again? One of these days, Renato thought, I should really figure out my motives before I pounce. Nah. Was it true? Was he on this adventure just to see Zenobia again? The Imperial heir was not an easy cat to see. Well, she'd ignored all his Kwanzaa gifts. And on the other paw, trying to get a date by joining a war against your intended was, let's say, pretty optimistic. But on the back paw, thought Renato, yes, it sounded exactly like him. Good. I'm so glad we had this little chat, he told himself. What were these poles, exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods? What did you do if one of these platforms stalled? A lot of dead ravens along the side of the road. Someone had rampaged through here on a killing spree. What had Zenobia got to get? He had a chilling feeling. He could recognize her blade work in the wounds of the dead birds. Why had she killed them? Surely her father's soldiers were no threat to her. Only he had some way to break the ice. Or convince it he was a friend. He reached the summit, expecting no one. But there she was, steaming, pacing.
I'm gonna kill him, she said. I'm gonna kill all his ravens, and then him, and then his family, and all their eggs and tadpoles. And then I'm gonna burn down their pond.
Did you go and get the Iblis stone?
You see, all these ravens I killed. So much power.
Are you feeling normal? Because you seem a little bloodthirsty.
Yes, obviously it wants blood. Demons always want blood.
You really want power from a demonic rock?
You want the stone, don't you?
Not really.
Good. I'd rather not have to kill you.
He told her he loved her. That he wouldn't let the Iblis stone take her, even if he had to die for it. Well, he planned to tell her. Now didn't seem like the right time. She'd probably cool off in a bit. So he let her get in her ship and fly off. He rushed back to the Farfarer and followed her, keeping a healthy distance. Zenobia's ship was just visible through the clouds ahead. How could he reason with her? But he had to. The rebels were down for the count. No wonder. He'd betrayed the location of their base and then he'd abandoned them. And if she became Empress while she was in the grip of the Iblis stone, if she became Empress by murdering her father, she could still be a great Empress. But she could also be a nightmare Empress. She had to be stopped. There were more dead ravens along his path, some of them wounded in the back. He knew she could have easily talked her way past them, or clouded the little tiny raven brains with a spell. She was going out of her way to kill everything in her path. This wasn't Zenobia, not as he knew her.
Sorry, mustache, thought Renato.
Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. He would be cursing a blue streak.
Hey, I'm a firefox, thought Renato.
So, his beloved was possessed by the spirit of a demon. That's what it meant to be a hero. To brave the darkness in your loved one's soul. To have faith there was still good in her. To help her out of that darkness, no matter what the cost. But what? What could he do? She'd kill him if he tried to take the Iblis stone from her. He was sort of yanking his own chain, wasn't he? At the end of the trail of raven corpses was Zenobia. Her father was frantically rigging a strange apparatus wrapped around a glowing core.
Don't do it, he shouted. You'll hate yourself in the morning. Stay back, she screamed in a horrible voice he'd never heard before.
It froze him in his tracks. The Emperor stared at him.
Run,
He told the toad,
or hop.
but he didn't manage to voice it, only think it. Zenobia stabbed her blade forward, and His Majesty fell dead. She began laughing hysterically.
Or was she weeping?
Just walk away, she laughed at him. I've no more use for you. There was something he needed to do, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So he did as he was told. As he walked away, he felt a chill in the world. The light in the sky seemed to dim. He didn't dare turn. He had a nagging feeling there was something he should have done just then. Something heroic. But he could not have taken the Iblis stone from her by force. And she would not have parted with it willingly. A cold wind blew from where she had been. But he still didn't dare turn. And then, an awful laughter filled the air. And all the torches and all the ships went out. And he realized what he should have done. But by then, it was too late to do anything. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this This was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him. That meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Bernardo. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Bernardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple, another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? I wonder what I could make with all these sword crafting materials, thought Renato. Bernardo distrusted doors that opened automatically, especially after being buried for millennia. Was this some sort of trap? Chill out. Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good.
Then he hadn't come too late. Nice. That could be useful.
He needed some way to break the ice with this wall, so to speak. Is a very cool sword, thought Renata. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore. That was always a rush. How could a temple to Iblis still even exist? The transcendent emperor had destroyed all the shrines of the lost gods after exiling them. Had it been buried in that long-ago battle? Or had Iblis foreseen his fate and hidden it from his enemy? The Ravens, at least, could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. This was much easier than free climbing. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. I can hate you, I see. Who said that? It was the stone, eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "Not the core," said the stone anxiously. The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board. The moment he landed the Farfarer, Renato had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fruit School together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd... No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late. This jewel was more than sparkly. It had arcane power and an engraving. To Cindy. Renato felt ready to become faster, stronger, bolder. If only he could figure out which. He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons. shy. The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The core will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?"
No, don't be ridiculous.
It chuckled.
But it's unstable. If a poison so much as carry it, and if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically.
Renato did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
This could be the new aerobics craze. Am I right?
This couldn't be good for global warming.
Cool. Wish I could do that.
As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical.
No, it's too much power. We'll rip a hole in space and time.
He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out. When Renato came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent. "I can't hear you," he sang out. And, "Yoo-hoo!" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? As the Farfarer made its way toward the Nexus, Renato watched sparks fly out of the core. The Iblis stone sucked them in hungrily. You'd think the stone would want this kind of power, wouldn't it? Thought Renato. Well, the scientists would explain it all. This time, Renato was sure he'd figured out. See? He'd trusted his gut, and it had worked out. That's what it meant to be a hero. To ignore the naysayers and the odd-makers, and do what you knew was right, and have it turn out to be the right thing. Well, he wasn't worried. Once he got to the observatory, the scientist toads could explain it. Then he could carry the war into the enemy's camp and destroy them all. Dear, he was getting a little bloodthirsty, wasn't he? Ice walls only let you through if they knew you were cool. Ever used. Renato wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles. Renato had never felt better in his life. Normally, a battle would wear him down and he would need a night's sleep. Now he felt like he could go all night and all day. He felt like people were cheering him on, and he could practically hear their applause as he slew one raven after another. The Iblis Stone and the Sky Ripper Core. Two artifacts from the time of legends. Bernardo was becoming a legendary hero, wasn't he? He had enough power to save the rebellion, but he had to understand this power, so he would not misuse it.
With this device, he could travel at night, so long as there are ravens to set on fire.
Na. Hey. Goodbye.
The toads at the observatory measured the stone with their occult devices. I fed it the core of Sky Ripper, explained Renato. No more VV pattern souls.
But the core is not an unlimited energy source,
Said one toad. Another said,
There's a feedback loop, you see, which could overload the stone. Yeah, the stone doesn't actually feed on souls.
Claimed a third.
But on pain of killing another sentient being. If you can truly be at peace with yourself, it would not overload.
This was all very confusing. At peace? Yes, the mountains were peaceful and quiet, but he now had the power to turn the tides. He should report to the Rebellion Council and prepare for the decisive battle. Couldn't make sense of anything the toads said, and he was ready for anything the ravens could throw at him. His sword felt ready too. It seemed to know what he wanted most.
He wasn't that good. Yet.
This was way better than being able to shrink down to the size of an ant. What was that all about, anyway? practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things. Iblastone wasn't pestering him anymore. Good. He didn't want to chit-chat, not with anybody. He didn't want to think about Zenobia or Lapino. He just wanted to fight. From the mystical East could make time itself slow for you. Firewalls only let you through if they think you're hot enough. This was almost fun. Pain of killing another sentient being? What was that toad talking about anyway? He felt no pain, only pleasure as each filthy raven fell by his sword and the stone glowed brighter and brighter. But all the while, those voices were cheering him on like he was in the arena, winning bout after bout.
Like the world's deadliest bowman right by his side.
Bernardo hated gogglers, but it freaked him out to cut them. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
I think this is yours, said Bernardo. But he couldn't hear his enemy's answer.
What's there?
He slew and slew across the ruins and into the labyrinth that hid the secret rebel base. He was surprised not to see any defenders or even any of the council toads. When he reached the council chambers, there were still no toads, only filthy ravens. "Stop him! He's gone mad!" one raven shouted until he had hacked them all down. There was not a single toad anywhere. No doubt they'd all been taken prisoner. So it was up to him to take revenge upon the Imperial fleet.
But where had they taken the council? It couldn't be good that the Empire had not only found the secret rebel base, but killed or captured everyone there. No matter. He was on a roll. He headed full speed towards the Imperial fleet. He would be the fox who took down 100 warships. He charged. The Imperial fleet was huge and deadly, but he was deadlier.
The crowd was cheering him on. He could practically hear it. Bernardo, the hero of the rebellion.
It was time for a little exploration. Felt like Tarzan. As he slew his way across the fleet, Bernardo thought he could hear a small voice whispering in his ear.
Look at your gauntlet, you idiot, it said. Oh, for heaven's sake, he thought. Can't I be alone in my own head? Look at the stone. I'm busy, he told the voice. Talk later. Then it will be too late, cried the voice. Don't be so bloody thick. Piss off, he told the voice and kept up his slaying. It wasn't his fault. They looked so breakable. Renato wondered what would happen if he jumped. Would he be rescued by an emergency platform? There was the Emperor. Renato cut down his elite guard. The exalted Toad cowered fearfully. He had sought to evade death and only made death come to him faster. Renato savored the moment. And then, too quick, it was over. He stood over the dead Emperor.
Death to tyranny! He shouted. Go, House, go!
Zenobia stepped out of the shadows. You have to stop, she said. You've killed everyone. Our ravens, your rebels. You murdered the whole rebel council. What? Oh, the ravens killed the council. Yeah, big idiot. They don't even know what the secret base is. Shouted Lupino, who was with her for some reason. Look at the stone, said Zenobia. It was black as night. Blacker. But I fed it the core, said Renato. It was glowing. Well, who needs a core? He said, and he attacked. Zenobia conjured her best, and Lupino hopped around like a mad rabbit, but he killed them both easily.
I am unstoppable, he orated at the blood-soaked walls. I alone shall be emperor.
The tiny voice inside him screamed, that doesn't even sound like you big fanny. The stone has stolen your mind. But he ignored it. Who listens to voices in their heads anyway? Madmen, that's who. And just like that, he was alive again. And back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, but he'd learned another true thing. The Iblis Stone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it.